Okay, so Sally is on. We have all of the candidates for the Mountain View City Council election on. And we have we have 58 attendees right now and growing. But in the interest of time, I'd like to go ahead and get started. So good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank all of the City Council candidates for taking their time to meet with us, and also all of the residents who are joining in and everyone else for taking part in this candidate forum today, hosted by the Mountain View Mobile Home Alliance. My name is Tim Larson, and I'm the current president of the Mountain View Mobile Home Alliance, and I'll be moderating the forum today. To learn more about us, you can visit our webpage at www.mvmha.com. We'll put that in the chat. I know these have been difficult times for a lot of Mountain View residents, and we're sad that we can't meet in person today. But right now we have over 100 people signed up, and I think over 60 already joining, and so we're excited to try something new. I'm going to real quick go over the schedule and how we hope the candidate forum will work today. Today's forum is scheduled for 90 minutes, and we're going to open up with opening statements from each of the candidates that will run for 90 seconds. After that, we're going to open the floor for questions from the audience, as well as questions that were submitted by some interested residents in advance. In order to give every candidate an opportunity to speak, we'll have to be strict with time limits. Each question will be given a time limit between 30 and 90 seconds in advance for the candidates, and we'll have a timekeeper sort of moderating so that we can try to keep on track. To the audience, if you want to submit a question, you can type a question into the Q&A box that should be at the bottom of your screen at the Zoom window. And then you should also be able to view and vote on questions that you want to highlight as most important to you. If a question is selected, we're going to have to play with this, but we believe that we can have you announce the question yourself and allow you to talk if you want to raise your hand. Otherwise, I can just announce your name and read the questions out to the candidates. You can identify your park or neighborhood if you want to have that included as well. And you can also, I think it might be possible to submit anonymous questions, and if those get voted up, we can try to address those also. We've also kept the chat open for everyone. We'd like to keep the candidates to answering by audio only. The chat is sort of for the audience to communicate with each other. We'd also like to keep this a respectful dialogue. So please keep that in mind as you write your questions and engage in the chat. If things get too rowdy, we may have to close the chat down and move the discussion to somewhere anything goes, like the comment section of the Mountain View Voice. So now with that, let's have the candidates introduce themselves. And we just sort of chose a random order. And
actually, can the timekeeper shuffle?
Oh, great. Let's just do a shuffle real quick and see how that works.
All right.
So I can't see you. Is that Lisa?
Yep.
Okay. Are you ready to go, Lisa?
Yes. Sorry, nothing changed on my screen. So thank you for holding this forum. I appreciate it. It's always good to meet with residents and hear their concerns and have a good discussion of the issues. Let me tell you a little bit about me. I've lived in Mountain View for over 20 years. And like everyone else, I love my neighborhood and I love the city. I got involved locally about 10 years ago when I was the founding president of the Wagon Wheel Neighborhood Association. And I got to tell you, being part of that neighborhood association is one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. I have met so many wonderful people. It's just been a sheer joy. I was on the city's Environmental Planning Commission for 7 years before being elected to council. And the EPC is certainly great for getting a good base in land use because the council talks about land use a lot. This is my 4th year on the council, and I'm running for re-election because while we've accomplished a lot, there's still a lot of work to be done. 4 years goes by really quickly. I care about great neighborhoods, and I care about the city, and I want to continue to represent residents who share similar perspectives to mine, and I look forward to a great forum here today. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I think John is up next.
Okay, thanks. Mobile Home Alliance, first, thank you for inviting me to participate in your candidate forum today. My name is John Lashley, and I'm running to represent you on the Mountain View City Council. It's been my honor to serve the community of renters and workers in Mountain View the last 4 years as an activist for housing and social justice. Like many of you, I'm also a political organizer, In 2016, I was a founding member of the Silicon Valley Democratic Socialists of America. As a political organizer in Mountain View, I've campaigned to save our rent control law, argued for the lowest possible rent increases, and campaigned to protect RV residents from eviction. As you probably noticed from that list of campaigns, there are some very important issues that I don't see eye to eye with the City Council on, and I believe that Mountain View is heading in the wrong direction. But we can change, which is why I'm running for City Council. I will work to prevent all evictions during COVID, strengthen rent control in Mountain View, solve our upcoming budget crisis, and yes, we must immediately extend rent control and renter protections to mobile home residents. You have built a formidable and important alliance here. I'm honored to have spoken to you at your regular meeting on July 11 and again today. I hope that I will earn your faith and endorsement, and I respectfully ask for your vote. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, John. I think Lenny is up next.
Hi, I'm Lenny Siegel. I've lived in Mountain View since 1972. In the late 70s, when I was on the Planning Commission, I organized unsuccessfully for rent control and successfully to control condominium conversions. In 2014, I re-entered Mountain View politics, formed the Campaign for a Balanced Mountain View to promote the development of more housing, particularly in North Bayshore, and was elected to the City Council along with Pat later that year. I am a lifelong activist, and to me, the biggest justice issue in Mountain View is housing. Our mobile home parks have always been a place where people on fixed incomes can live at a relatively low cost, and that relatively low cost has disappeared, particularly in the Vidovich mobile home parks. And when we put Measure V on the ballot in 2016, I opined that it covered mobile homes, but somehow the Rental Housing Committee overlooked the recommendations of their attorneys and excluded them. So I'm prepared through any means to get mobile homes covered by the CSFRA. These aren't the only issues, but they're some of the most important issues, and the issues that I think divide the field. The council had the opportunity to include mobile home coverage in Measure D, and they chose not to.
Next up is Margaret.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. It's been an honor to serve you on the Mountain View City Council and as your mayor this year. During this pandemic and nationwide civil unrest, I've worked hard to successfully respond to our community's concerns and needs. Working together with my colleagues, staff, and other partners, nonprofit, private, and public, I initiated the largest rent relief program in the county, a small business resiliency program, open safe parking lots for vehicle dwellers, enhanced food, hygiene, and safety assistance for homeless and low-income families, brought COVID testing to Mountain View, opened Castro Street's outdoor dining, and fostered community dialogue around diversity and working to ensure equitable and inclusive city services. We now need to work together to build our community back. As your mayor in 2009, I led the city out of the Great Recession and helped develop Mountain View to be the great place it is by implementing innovative approaches to address housing, transportation, and climate change. I championed safe and strong neighborhoods, added parks, improved infrastructure, expanded city services, and partnered with our schools. And my fiscal prudence and work on innovative revenue generation in the past decade directly contributed to a balanced city budget this year with no cuts. My leadership experience, especially during crisis, and extended record of results makes me the right person to continue on the City Council at this critical time. I ask for your support and your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Next up, we'll hear from Sally.
Well, thank you so much, Tim. And I want to thank everyone who's on the call today. And I hope that everyone is managing to stay cool today. If you can keep an eye out for your neighbors, especially seniors can be vulnerable because as we get older, temperature control doesn't work so well for us. So making sure that you're drinking water and that those who live near you have water as well. I have been a longtime advocate for our mobile home residents. Like Lenny, I proposed mobile home rent control for Mountain View in 2000. And we didn't get it done then, but it is very motivating to me to get it done now, because I'm one of the many people who voted for Measure V, understanding that mobile homes would be included in rent control. And I would like to see folks from our mobile home communities be on the rental housing committee and be on our other boards and commissions within the city, and really hear from the residents in the parks about what kinds of amenities and what kinds of city services that you would like to have. So I think that today is really the continuation of a dialogue with some folks who know me from being on city council and being mayor and in the state assembly, and the start of a dialogue with others, because it's really up to you. We are seeking to serve you. So thank you so much for being here today.
Okay, thanks. Next up is Paul.
Thank you. And thank you for everyone who's hosting this and listening in on this very hot Saturday in Mountain View. This period of recovery is a once in a generation opportunity for our community to build a community that really works better for everyone. To seize this opportunity, we need a city that moves at the pace of our challenges, that responds in a timely way with solutions that are as big as our problems. As a college student at Purdue University, I was first elected to the City Council in West Lafayette, Indiana. During my time there, I brought together a diverse community coalition to protect neighborhoods and build new housing. We built good housing projects that everyone in the community was proud of. Since that time, I've worked as a software engineer at the New York Times, Google, and now Waymo. To make this most of our pivotal moment in our community, I've developed detailed plans on housing, police modernization, social justice, environmental stewardship, traffic, COVID recovery, and more. We need this type of fresh thinking and experienced outsider perspective in our city, because today and for too long, our city has moved too slow and done too little. When RVs lined city streets, it took the city council 4 years of studying and deliberating to create only 30 safe parking spots to help 600 unhoused residents in our community. For years, mobile home residents have been left in limbo, waiting to understand what housing rules apply to them. At a time when many in our city are struggling, our city leadership is bailing out large corporations like Live Nation and building a $500,000 sand volleyball court, instead of focusing on helping our community and providing more COVID relief for our struggling.
You're at time, Paul? Okay, thank you. Alex?
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you for being here. It's definitely hot outside, so hope you don't mind me drinking lots of water. I'm running for city council because from the bottom of my heart and my belief system, I believe that the role of government is to truly look after the general welfare of all of its residents. And over the last 5 years, I have been on the front lines in Mountain View, seeing the way that our residents coming together and exercising their self-right to determination for the most material and fundamental needs that they have, housing, rents. When people come together to take collective action to solve these problems, I have witnessed how our current decision-making process has taken every single step to stymie citizens' right to self-determination. I'm running because I want to make sure that our renter protections that people fought and won for themselves are not being eroded by a city government that does not agree with our residents. I'm running for city council to make sure that our low-income and socioeconomically diverse populations are no longer being displaced when it comes to redevelopment. I'm running because I believe we need a government that's responsive to people and their concerns and their voices. And as your council representative, I will make sure that our government responds to you. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Alex. Next up, Jose.
There we go. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to be here. As you can tell, we've got so many qualified individuals, talented with their unique perspectives and their past experiences. And to be here together with them, it's an honor and a privilege, but also to be able to hear what your concerns are is what drives me to be able to make a difference here in Mountain View. I've been part of this city's for about 20 years now. I've got 2 kids who are part of the public school system, Graham Middle School, and then Los Altos High School. In 2015, I began my community service. I was appointed to the school board out of a field of 11 candidates. And in 2016, I was elected to a 4-year term. On that board and in the school district, as you remember, or you may not know, controversy is not out of the ordinary. Our board has evolved since then to the point where we can agree to disagree. And that's where I come in to try and set that tone and perspective where everyone can treat one another with respect and courtesy, but also have an exchange of ideas that promote the betterment of the city and our environment as a whole. What I've dealt with then is what I see now on this council and in the future, which is we need to bridge the gap of communication and perspectives. There's too much to the left and there's too much to the right. We have to look at the greater whole of the city, and we can only do that through communication that's thoughtful and respectful, and a generation of ideas that helps everyone be able to be part of the city of Mountain View and feel comfortable to be residents here, thinking about the future. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And Pat.
Well, hi, good afternoon, and thanks for having us all. I think this is really the best way for people to make a decision about who to vote for, to see everybody talk at the same time. So I'm glad we're able to do it even in the time of COVID. I'm Pat Showalter. I'm a 36-year resident of Mountain View, and I had the honor of serving on council and as your mayor. I'm running to lead my community through the COVID-19 pandemic and to bring residents and businesses together to work on the housing, health, racial justice, traffic, and climate change issues that are affecting us all. I cherish Mountain View's tradition of diversity and inclusion and want to work to protect it. Now more than ever, we need leaders who know how to get things done. My government service, both as an elected official and as a civil servant, has taught me how to achieve results both regionally and locally. As a civil engineer, my background applies directly to infrastructure, land use, and environmental protection decisions. It also means I'm pragmatic. While planning is important, the payoff comes when projects are built and programs are implemented. I've been advocating for housing and sustainability here for over 20 years, so you can count on me to continue with that. Having been on council before, I know this job and will hit the ground running. The middle of a pandemic is a time for leaders you can count on. People tell me I'm a good listener. Now that's important because the best outcomes require experts from many disciplines and people with wide perspectives working together. So it would be an honor to serve you on City Council. Thank you.
And thank you, Pat. I believe that has concluded the opening statements from the candidates. And so now we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. People have submitted several Q&As, and we'll start addressing those. The very first question we're going to ask, though, is one that all of the Alliance members and a number of other residents asked about, which basically centers around rent control and Measure V. As most people here know, Mountain View residents passed Measure V in 2016. It was also known as the Community Stabilization and Fair Rent Act. This ensured rent stabilization for many tenants in Mountain View. Many mobile home residents are obviously concerned about the fact that we've been excluded, and we feel like we have been targeted for especially increasing rents, and there's a lot of vulnerable people living in the mobile home community. And then more broadly, people are concerned about attacks that have been on the CSFRA, and they're worried that at some point, the council or developers may try to get a ballot measure passed to attack the CSFRA. So we'd like the candidates to state their position on rent stabilization for mobile homes and more broadly on protecting the CSFRA. And I think this one will give you guys 60 seconds to answer. And so the timers have been shuffled again, and so we'll just go down the line and we'll start with John. Thank you.
Great question. Let me clarify and repeat myself. We must extend rent control and renter protections to mobile home residents, period. I believe we can do that immediately, and we can do that legally. So that's my position. Second, I'm tired of playing defense on rent control. Like I said, I helped found the local Silicon Valley DSA. We've been on the forefront of fighting defense in terms of rent control, preserving it, making it robust, protecting it. We collected signatures to keep the sneaky repeal off the ballot, and indeed it is off the ballot this year. I'm ready to play offense on rent control and renters' rights. We need an ordinance that guarantees legal representation in the case of eviction. We must extend our renter protections and not just play defense, because we have to take the fight forward. Eventually, a ballot measure would pass that would hurt rent control. So that's why we need to push the fight forward. And that's what I will do on the city council.
Thank you, John. Next is Jose.
Thank you. Back in 2016, I signed on to Measure V and voted for that as well. I'm a renter. I'm on 1984 Latham Street in the middle of the two 7-Elevens. But also as a school board member, I've seen the effect of how the high prices of rent have affected our kids and our school districts with added stress. Right now, during COVID-19, it's even more of a stressful time. A lot of our Latino parents who had jobs during the day no longer have them because of the virus. They were helping out at homes or in different parts of the country in the underground economy, I should say the county. And their dads who have construction jobs have also been isolated out. And I bring that up because that's not really talked about. And so rent relief right now and the moratorium on evictions, that's an important issue for me, not just as a school board member, but as a member of the city. And I never understood why rent control didn't cover mobile homes. My big question that I have is action going to be delayed until the case that's being litigated now gets resolved? Or is there some way that we can do something now? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alex.
All right, so I am fully supportive of the CSFRA. I was serving as a volunteer in 2015 and 2016 to make sure that this passed from its early initiatives. And I also served as the co-lead against Measure D this last March to help protect our renter protections. I've also been there witnessing every step along the way as a rental housing committee has been appointed by our council specifically because they are opposed ideologically and in practice to renter protections in general, not just anywhere, not just here in Mountain View. If elected to city council, one of my top 3 priorities will be to correct the injustice of mobile home residents having had the rent control protections taken away from them. And I believe that the city needs to do everything it can to defend the correction of this injustice. Even if we get sued, it's important for us to say, what are we willing to actually pay for? And correcting injustice against our residents needs to be one of those things. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Lenny.
Thank you. The City Council last year developed a measure that could have included rent control for mobile homes and didn't. Instead, the council majority chose to propose Measure D, which would have weakened the CSFRA. 3 of the candidates here appeared on pro-Measure D flyers paid for by the big landlords, yet the voters turned them down 70-30. The landlords have just withdrawn the sneaky repeal would have been Measure D from the November ballot. So I expect them instead to put money into the council campaign to elect and re-elect council members who don't really believe in rent control, but instead want to again try to appoint people to the rental housing committee who do not fully back the concept of Measure V. I was actually the only council member in 2016 that supported Measure V. Pat also supported rent control. But we've had a long history of the landlords tinkering in our elections. So watch out who they support.
Thank you, Lenny. Paul.
Thank you. We'll be really clear. There's a lot of nuance, a lot of complication around housing, but I want to be very clear that a clear text reading of the community CSFRA should apply to mobile homes. It's very clear that the law is intended to apply to mobile homes. It's very clear that it should apply to mobile homes. The city should not be coward and should not be scared of spending money or legal threats to defend that. Our community has spoken very, very clearly on voting for Measure V and turning down D, that this is what they would like in their community. And so the council needs to respect that, respect the will of the voters, and move that forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Next up is Margaret.
Thank you. So I have, believe it or not, I actually have supported rent stabilization for mobile homes. I did not support Measure V. I had some reservations about it being a charter amendment. And as we've seen, it wasn't written entirely clearly, and we've had to look at how we could make some adjustments, and it's incredibly difficult to do so when you have to go to the ballot box to do that every time. And so, however, with Measure D, we were actually trying to create a path for rent control for mobile homes. And many of you here I met with during that time period right before the primary to explain our thought process in doing that. Frankly, if there was no lawsuit and the RHC's decision was left as is, the city council could have taken mobile home park rent control as an ordinance. But the council then, the mayor then who's on here, chose not to do that. They wanted to fight it through the lawsuit. And so that's really the challenge. The lawsuit is
You're at time over.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much, Margaret. Sally.
Thank you. Well, I'm really frustrated with all of the twists and turns of the implementation of Measure V. I think it's pretty clear what the voters' intent was. And I do think that the Rental Housing Committee has been sabotaged over time by appointment of people who are just plain hostile towards rent control. And I think that we can break through these log jams and really get to the point where we have rent control for mobile homes. And I also think that we need to do more to strengthen protections against park conversion, because at some point, the park owners will fight back against rent control for mobile home parks by threatening conversion. And I think we have to have those protections in place to protect the equity that folks have in their homes. I think that we can also do more to guarantee the right to sell and the right to rent within a mobile home park. But we've got to have council members who are willing and interested to take those steps to protect the very valuable in our parks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sally. Pat.
Hi, yes, I've been a strong supporter of rent control, particularly since it was passed by the voters, Measure V was passed, and the implementation of the CSFRA. We got a clear measure, we got a clear message from the voters. And before that, serving on city council, I listened to hundreds and hundreds of hours of people lamenting how they were being forced to move out of our community because of crazy rising rents. So CSFRA has worked really well to help stem that tide of displacement. And that's a great thing for our community. But mobile homes, I would agree with most of the people who've spoken here. I think it was very, when I read the CSFRA initially, I thought mobile homes were included. So I've been very surprised by all this, these problems with getting it included. And I am committed to do my part if I'm reelected to council to get the mobile home parks included.
Okay, thank you very much. Next up, we have Lisa.
Thank you. So I read the CSFRA and I thought it was a bit ambiguous, and I think different bodies have been provided with different information, the Rental Housing Committee versus the council, and it's ambiguous. But if you go to the voter pamphlet from 2016, the argument in favor of Measure V, it says right there, allows the creation of similar protections for mobile home residents. And it's signed by one of the candidates running for council. So it says it allows the creation. It doesn't say that they're covered. I would imagine that if they were covered, it would have said that. So the council has taken action to address this. We did, as the mayor said, try to make it clear that the council had the authority to do this in case there was any concern with Measure D. But we still have the lawsuit that we need to deal with, but I think we're proceeding to discuss this again. I personally am open to it. I wanted to also explore having the model leases as well.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. And that concludes the answer to that question. Thank you, everyone. We'll do a real quick follow-up on that. So this will just be, like a quick, we'll put 30 seconds on the clock, but we just like you guys to address how you would handle future RHC members. Would you commit to having a mobile home vendor, mobile home resident on the RHC, and how would you, vet future mobile future members of the RHC? And we'll start with John.
30 seconds?
Yes.
Okay. It's my position that the RHC must be fully renters. I don't want the foxes guarding the hen house, metaphorically. I don't want landlords or property managers on the RHC deciding how much money their bosses want to earn. The way I would vet people for the RHC is to ask them about their support of the charter amendment and the implementation. I do support having a mobile home resident on the RHC as well.
Thank you very much. Sally?
Yeah, I think it's vital to have mobile home residents on the RHC. And I think it's also entirely appropriate to ask what individuals' views are on rent control. Because if they are just strictly hostile towards the concept, then they are prejudiced against the work that they'll be doing. And they will be acting in a quasi-judicial manner in making decisions about the level of rents. And I think that we can't have individuals there who cannot do the job. So if they are self-professed that they cannot do that, they should not be appointed.
Thank you very much, Sally. Jose.
Thank you. The RHC is a very interesting situation, right? I mean, I'm on the school board. I listen to my advice from council. We act on it. We move forward. This didn't happen here. I'd like to have a diverse set of people on the RHC, including a member from the mobile home park community, but also possibly a nonprofit organization. And I believe that what we need is more outreach to have these types of persons apply for the positions and encourage them to do so, vetting them that way to figure out what their interest is, not just only with Measure V, but also with the future, how they look at rent control in general.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm just briefly going to interject. I realize I didn't explain. The RHC is the Rental Housing Committee, and the RHC is a 5-member board that was created by Measure V, the CSFRA, to administer rent stabilization in the city of Mountain View. So the members who sit on the RHC are the ones who make key decisions. They were the ones who decided to exclude mobile homes from being covered under the CSFRA, and they make other key decisions about administering rent control in the city. And with that, Margaret is up next.
So I would like to see balance and diversity. I believe Measure V was sold as a balanced approach. And so that's what I'd like to see in the RHC. We've also learned through the implementation the last several years that it's actually a very technical position. And so it would be important to have that kind of experience and background. I'm certainly open to a mobile home park resident. I think, again, it's part of that diversity and balance that I'm really looking for. Thanks.
Thank you, Margaret. Pat.
Hi, yeah, thanks for asking this question. I think it's on everybody's mind. I would welcome having an RHC member serve on, having a Mobile Home Alliance member serve on the RHC. I think it would bring an important perspective that would be very valuable. But I just want to say that one of the things I think we really need to talk about here is how vital this board is. The city council makes lots of appointments, and typically we kind of took the city staff they collected information and we looked at that information and then we interviewed them. We need to do more background work.
Okay, thank you very much, Pat. Lenny.
So I haven't heard any legal advice from the city attorney's office on potential conflicts of interest. I don't want a rental housing committee member who has to recuse himself or herself because their equity in their mobile home might be affected by a decision. So I'd like, if it passes that test, I'm all for it. But I'd also like to ask all council members, not just the candidates, to disclose to the public all of the communications they've been having about the next appointment coming up to the rental housing committee this fall.
Thank you very much, Lenny. Now we have Paul.
Yeah, I think the problem with RHC to date has been that it's easy for the city council to obfuscate what they really want done there by hiding it behind the committee. So I would like to see the RHC membership expanded to 7 people so that each councilor appoints 1 member of the RHC and it becomes clear where the council stands on these issues. So I think having an RHC that's more responsive to the citizens, you see in Berkeley where they're directly elected would be another good step we could do as well.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I believe we have a few more on the list. We have Alex.
Yeah, I just want to be clear that changing the way the RHC works and going through the charter will take much longer than just appointing 5 good people right now who we know have a documented history of supporting rent control in Mountain View. It's by time that we end the RHC status as an agency captured by the industry it's supposed to be regulating. I'll make sure that anyone who is technical is also a documented supporter of the CSFRA in Mountain View and make sure that we restore these protections.
Thank you, Alex. Lisa.
Thank you. So I think it is important to have people with different perspectives and backgrounds and knowledge on any advisory body, any board, any commission, even on the council. And so I've been supportive of having a broad range of folks on there. I'm very open to having somebody from a mobile home park on there. But as the mayor said, I think it's important that they have the technical qualifications to be an active participant. And as long as they don't have to recuse themselves, yes, I'm fine with it.
Thank you, Lisa. And that is it for that question. The next question that has been sort of voted to the top of the list is we'd like the candidates to address your position on public housing. And I think I'd like to expand that a little bit more broadly to affordable housing in the context of the housing developments that are going on. And for this one, I can't see how much time the timekeeper has added, but it looks like it should be 90 seconds. So you guys, no, let's do 60 seconds to try to get through a couple of more questions so we don't all get stuck on just this. Very good. So you'll have a minute to address your position on housing. And we'll start with, did you shuffle? Yes, it's good. So we'll start with John.
Okay,
thank you very much.
My position on public housing is we have to be honest with ourselves. We've been trying a private only approach and it has failed. Candidates for the last how many decades have said, I want to solve the housing crisis. Private housing production has not done so. It will never do so. It will never produce affordable, below market rate housing for people below the AMI, the median income level. That's why I'm in favor and fearlessly a proponent of producing public housing for public good. It can be built in a sustainable way in which high income tenants cross-subsidize low-income tenants, and thus it can be sustainable during budget drawdowns like we're going to see in the next 2 years. It's my position that we can fund this through expanded corporate taxation over time with no cuts to our vital city services. I am a public housing advocate, and in all of the above approach, public and private, we have to fast track it in Mountain View to get out of our crisis.
Thank you, John. And also, John addressed sort of funding issues, and funding issues about housing was also raised. So if the other candidates have thoughts there as well, that would be great. Next up, we have Jose.
Sorry, I was taking notes. Thank you. I'm a supporter of public housing. I know that private housing in general is an issue. There's a lot of limitations I'll give you a quick example. When the school district, the board that I'm a part of, wanted to try and partnership with the city to see if we can get a school strategy tied to development and fees, it was a no-go because it's against the law. You can't do that. What I like to see though happen and encourage from the private side is there's an apartment complex that's right behind where Tide House used to be, where the rents are based on the person's income. A family of four, if they make a certain amount, would pay a certain amount in rent, which is well below market rate. I like to see more of that type of development be encouraged here in Mountain View so that we can really look at the working class and the missing middle to make sure that they stay here, be a part of our community, and keep contributing to it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jose. Now we have Alex.
I support public housing, but not as the end all be all to the solution. I do believe that the market can produce housing much faster than public sectors can. The problem, I think, is that the rules under which the private market has been producing housing have enabled developers to basically increase homelessness, increase poverty, reduce our housing stock without them actually having to pay for any of the public and social consequences that they create. That is why I believe a stronger approach will be to make sure that we implement stringent no net loss protections so that no development reduces housing stock overall. And I also believe that we need to make sure that we modify our zoning to enable greater amounts of actual market rate housing to be produced in Mountain View for everyone to be able to live in. Furthermore, I believe that it's important for us to make sure we look at the jobs housing imbalance as the name actually speaks to it. And I believe that it's critical that we look at adopting restrictions on further office development unless affordable units are actually created. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Lenny.
Well, there are two ways that we build affordable housing. Mountain View's got a pretty good record. The first is standalone projects in partnership primarily with nonprofits. And we have to continue doing that. And we have to, as I promoted when I was on council, we have to look at all of the public property that's underutilized, parking lots and other public property as a way of getting those projects going. Secondly, we have a 15 to 20% requirement for inclusionary below market. That's people pay based on their income in North Bayshore and other places. If we build 10,000 units in North Bayshore, we'll get more affordable housing there than we haven't built in the entire history of Mountain View. And finally, we have to more actively pursue community land trusts, which would allow people to accumulate equity when they're paying an amount for rent or mortgage based on their income. All three of those things are in the works, but we have to work harder at it.
Thank you, Lenny. Paul, you're up.
The core problem with housing in our community is that the city council has moved too slow for far too long. As our community changed, as our community grew, the city did not respond by building adequate housing. And this problem has now created enormous problems in our community. So the city needs to move faster. It needs to approve projects faster. It needs to get the gateway process moving faster. Everything needs to move faster to meet this need in our community. Now, the end goal is naturally affordable housing. This is housing new projects that are open and affordable to everyone in our community. We can't subsidize our way to providing affordable housing for everyone in our community. 80,000 residents will not get cross subsidies to make housing affordable in our community. So we need the city to step up, reform its processes and procedures, and meet the size of this challenge by building sufficiently in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Margaret.
Thank you. So I've been a strong proponent of, I now call it subsidized housing by the public sector. I agree with some of the other folks who said that it is up to government to create public housing, subsidized housing for affordability. As much as we'd like the market to do that, in this area, we have a lot more demand than we can supply for. And a correction, the city is in charge of zoning and allowing for housing to be built, but we are not in charge of building the housing. And that is up to frankly, the developers. And it was actually during the last Great Recession that we saw 3 years, pretty much 3 years where there was nothing being built. And that's when we got behind. So in terms of affordable housing, I have worked over my 3 terms. We championed housing impact fees. We were the first city to implement them across the board, rental, ownership, commercial. We did inclusion and rezoning as soon as we could. We upped it to 15%. In North Bayshore, when folks were calling for 20%, I was calling for 25%.
We're at time, Margaret.
Oh, all right, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Sally.
Thank you. I think that I'm seeing in chat that a lot of folks are wanting us to address that there's a difference between public housing and affordable housing. I do support both of those, and I see that distinction. And there was also a question about Section 8. Once you get a voucher, would landlords accept it? And now under the state law, landlords must accept Section 8. But if you go into Craigslist and other places like that, you see that there are still ads where landlords are saying no Section 8. And I think that our city attorney's office can help to address that when that's occurring in Mountain View. And I would really like to see that be going on and have it be reflected in whether or not that landlord still has a business license. I think that there's more that we can do in terms of nonprofit and city partnerships, especially on the properties that Lenny talked about. And even when the excess or underused properties belong to a different government agency, I think that we can take a leadership position in urging that and helping to change the state laws around that.
Oh, sorry about that. Thank you very much, Sally. Next up is Lisa.
Thank you. So the city has focused on building housing and in particular affordable housing. And if all of the housing that is in the pipeline or where property has been rezoned to accommodate housing, if all of that is built, will increase the housing stock in Mountain View by over 60%. And, you know, I'm pretty proud of the fact that Mountain View is a leader when it comes to housing. We also have the most aggressive affordable housing programs. As the mayor said, we have increased our requirements from 10% to 15% for both rental and ownership. And in North Bayshore and East Wisman, we have incentives to make it 20%. I'm open to exploring public housing. It hasn't been something we've done. You know, right now, I think it works really well when we partner with nonprofits to do subsidized housing. So I'd have to take a look at, well, are there benefits to doing that? I have a feeling we'd probably be slower than others in making this happen. So I'm over.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Lisa. Pat.
Well, affordable housing is something really important to me. I started working on it when I was on the EPC for 9 years and during the 90s. And I was glad to be part of the group that put together the below market rate fee ordinance that has led to the development of 1,400 affordable housing units in Mountain View. And we have over 1,000 in the pipeline. That's really something to be proud of, even though we all know it's not nearly enough. I serve right now on the Alta Housing Board. Alta Housing is a nonprofit corporation that has built and operated affordable housing for over 50 years. Used to be called Palo Alto Housing. And one of the things that I think we should be looking really carefully at is this new law that's going to allow land on religious organizations to be used for affordable housing. That could make it much more easy to get some very nice projects built here.
Thank you, Pat.
And I just want to, there was my dog Toffee, sorry.
No concerns. Thank you very much to the candidates. The next question, if Allison skews, she wanted to ask a question about Measure D, and we're going to try to allow her to ask that question. And so Allison, I guess we would give you a minute to try to ask the question, and then we'll allow the candidates some time to respond. So I'm going to try Well, that's interesting. I have to promote you to a panelist. Not sure that that is going to work. You might have to rejoin. So unfortunately, we can't allow you to ask the question out loud. While we see if that works, or if you want to type it into the box, then we can try that. There's a question sort of not exactly focused on housing, but somebody asked whether the candidates would pledge to run a positive campaign and denounce any independent expenditures from outside interests that change the culture of Mountain View, including the CAA. So this would be a quick answer just with 30 seconds. And let's go with that one. Pat, you're up.
I am very committed to running a clean campaign. The independent expenditures, that's a little confusing because independent expenditures, the candidate knows nothing about. What an independent expenditure is under the California rules is like a flyer that another organization sends, and the candidate knows nothing about that. So yes, indeed, I will not have anything to do with independent expenditures. It would be illegal. You're muted.
Thank you. I thought I clicked the button. I must have missed. And presumably then this question is also not just about independent expenditures, but also campaign donations from these organizations. And also, someone else pointed out that the question was, would you denounce these independent expenditures? So with that, Paul, you're up next.
Yes, I would denounce the independent expenditures. I think the campaign finance system that we have with limits in Mountain View work very well. I've also pledged to not accept donations from the police unions, from any landlord or any developer in town. And I would vote and welcome my other candidates to join me in not accepting any political contributions from these groups as well. And so there's the challenge for the rest of the panelists.
Thank you, Paul. Alex.
Yeah, so I would absolutely denounce any independent expenditure from the CAA, from developers, police unions, et cetera. And I'm proud to say that within the last filing period, I was the top fundraiser from the period of January through June, raising over $15,000. And I did it without taking any money from landlords or corporations or developers. So as far as any kind of challenge goes, I'm definitely there. 84.5% of my funds came from Mountain View residents, all individual contributors. So I challenge all future fundraisers to stick to that as well.
Thank you very much, Alex. Sally.
Yes, absolutely. I would denounce any independent expenditures. I think that it's just so disappointing that it's infected Mountain View. And a lot of folks know that when I ran for office recently, I had over $500,000 in negative ads against me, many of which were coming from the California Apartment Association. So I'm not accepting money from landlords, developers, corporations, the police, or any of that. And I think that in addition to having an overall limit on spending, we need to have a limit on contributions in Mountain View, because we've got half of the puzzle. And I encourage people to join the California Clean Money campaign.
Thank you very much, Sally. John.
I pledge to denounce independent expenditures, corporate money, landlord money, CAA money, police money. And I do laugh a little bit thinking about the CAA donating to my campaign. It's kind of funny. I also pledge to run a positive campaign, issue-oriented. You can see my platform on my website. The way I intend to run is by describing the positive change that I will make as your city council member. So that's definitely the way I'm going to run my campaign.
Thank you, John. Lenny.
Well, first, let's clarify what an independent expenditure is. When the South Bay Labor Council sends out a flyer supporting some of the candidates and I didn't get their endorsement, that is an independent expenditure, and that's okay with me. If a community group does that, that's okay with me. But I've pledged not to take money from developers. In fact, I've turned them down. I'm not taking money from fossil fuel companies. I'm not taking money from the top executives of major corporations. and I'm not taking money from Russian or Ukrainian oligarchs.
All right, well, that's good to clarify. Thanks, Lenny. Next up, Jose.
I completely agree with Lenny on that one, but I also want to add on that I'm in favor of running a positive campaign. And I think that's the difference between many of the folks here and the new blood that we need to have on the city council. We need to be able to bridge the communication gap so that we can work together as a team, as opposed to just pointing fingers at one another and saying, hey, there's a conspiracy going on here. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jose. Lisa.
Thank you. So I do plan on running a clean campaign and focus on me as opposed to others. And as Pat said, we don't have anything to do with independent expenditures. So I'm happy to denounce them. I'm not sure how to get that word out. It's not like I'm going to do a flyer to denounce it. But also the fundraising that I've done, the vast majority has come from residents within the city. And I'm proud of that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you for being on top of time. It's very helpful. Margaret.
Yes, I believe I have run a clean campaign throughout my time, and that's what Mountain View, I think we pride ourselves on. We want to focus on ourselves and our own record, not on our opponents. I will say there have been attacks on me as an incumbent already. I hope that doesn't continue. And in terms of independent expenditures, I think Lenny and Pat and the others pointed out, we don't have control over it. If a neighborhood wanted to do one, they could. So I think we just have to be, clear of what that is. But
Thank you. Thank you very much, Margaret. And next up that is the list for that question. Okay. So there's a number of questions more about housing. I think we've covered housing significantly. There is a question about sort of regarding Measure C, and what do you say to people living in RVs who might be pushed out of mobile homes if that one is passed? Do you have solutions to alternative housing options for people potentially affected by this measure? And there were a couple of other questions around just the impact of RV housing in the community that have been raised in the chat. So this one, we'll do a 60-second answer for this one. And then if anyone else has any other topics they'd like to raise, we probably have time for one or two more questions after this. We do have 30 minutes left in the forum. Just a quick time check. So we'll start with Margaret.
Thank you, and thanks for the 60 seconds. I think it's hard to talk about this in 30. So I think I have been working on other stable housing solutions. I think that's really the issue. I don't think RVs, oversized vehicles, or vehicle dwelling is a permanent solution to housing. So I have been looking for real solutions to housing. And in terms of what I'm really proud of is the safe lots that we have opened. They are being successful. I'm open to adding more spaces if we can in partnership with the county, as long as we can find the funding for it. And I actually wanted to credit one of my colleagues for bringing a potential opportunity to do a turnkey project in doing transitional housing. And I worked with staff to get an application done in 3 days, and they got it done. And this could be our first transitional housing project, and we could hopefully target it to the RV dwellers. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Margaret. And then someone wanted to clarify that the question very much they want to know who supports RVs on their streets and who does not. That was a question from Jennifer Carroll to the panelists. I think you answered that, Margaret. So we'll go on next to John.
Okay, thank you. I collected signatures to stop our safe parking ordinance. I call it an RV ban and respectfully disagree with some people about the use of the term. I believe it was in the wrong order. My position is we must build the centrally located safe parking program where people can live temporarily, before we ban RVs from our street. When we have a fully functional safe parking program, it is okay to talk about relocating RVs. But I believe we got it totally wrong with this ordinance, which is why I collected signatures to prevent it. Even putting the ordinance on the ballot cost comparable to what the city was putting into the safe parking program at the time. We need to invest more in safe parking before we relocate RVs. RVs are not a long-term solution to housing, but we have to take the steps in the right order to get there.
Okay, thank you very much, John. Sally.
Yeah, I don't know anyone who thinks that RVs are the best solution on the street, but they're a reality for our time. And I think that they're going to be increasing, particularly for seniors who are being priced out of our communities. And so I think that we need to work with the folks who are in the RVs and also the other vehicle dwellers in a positive, constructive manner. And I think that right now during a pandemic, it is especially necessary to do that. And I do believe that we need safe parking where a vehicle, whether it's an RV or a car, can be parked all day long and they can have the stability of being able to be in one place in a safe atmosphere. And I think we should be connecting with the schools to the greatest degree possible to talk about the many school families in Mountain View who an RV or a car is their last stop before homelessness.
Okay, thank you, Sally. Pat.
I'd say I generally agree with John and Sally. Here we are in the middle of a pandemic where every individual needs a shelter where they can shelter in place. So I'm concerned that this measure would lead to homelessness. So I oppose the narrow streets ban. Of course, no one feels that RVs living on the streets is a good thing. We need to build stable housing for people, but that's going to take a while. Short term, we know that safe parking does work. We only have 60 slots now in Mountain View. Out to Housing is going to be opening up 12 more next week. And we have about 200 RVs. So one of the things I'd like to work on to help people get stable housing is to get a program going to train volunteer caseworkers. It's really complicated to go through the bureaucratic steps to get stable housing. There's lots of help available, but it's sometimes hard to access. So I want to found a training program that will get volunteer caseworkers under a professional caseworker.
Thank you very much, Pat. Lisa.
Thank you. So one of the beauties of safe parking is the folks who move there work with caseworkers to help them get into more stable housing. And the last piece of information I saw was over 160 families had moved into stable housing, which is great. So that's the reason they exist. These are not long-term solutions. Living in a vehicle, whether it be an oversized vehicle or a car, is not a great quality of life. It isn't a great way to live. And so we want to help folks via the safe parking lots get into stable housing. I think one of the concerns is, Mountain View has become known for the services that we provide. And so other cities are telling folks to come here. So I personally feel like if we take care of all the folks who previously lived in Mountain View or work in Mountain View, have children in the school districts, we're doing pretty good. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Paul.
Thank you. The RVs on our streets are a symptom of a city that's moved too slow and failed to provide for our residents. It's just time and again, the wrong priorities from the wrong people. I mean, the great man Joe Biden uses this quote often: "Don't tell me what you value, show me your budget and I'll tell you what you value." Well, what this city's valued in the last few years is spending $300,000 bailing out a golf course instead of using the parking lot for that golf course to provide more safe housing. So we need some change in this community. We need to check our values and make sure that they're providing for everyone in our community. Spending 4 years investigating the problem and providing 30 spots for 600 unhoused people in our community is not enough. That's not going to be sufficient. We need a city that steps up and does a good job to provide for everyone in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Jose.
Thank you. I agree with what John, Sally, and Pat had mentioned, but I also want to reiterate and remind everyone that as a school board member of our district, I have to look at it from a different perspective. I was voted to be entrusted for the safety of our kids. We've got over 20 to 25 plus kids who are McKinney-Vento, which means that wherever they live, in any place within Mountain View, in an RV or a vehicle, they've got a right to attend the closest school that they can attend. And we need to think about that before we think about transitioning everyone to a central location or different spots in general that could affect their ability to attend their home school. So if we can look at it from that perspective, also factoring COVID-19, this is the wrong time for that. I saw Lenny and someone else at a farmer's market a while back getting signatures for the measure. I signed on to it. Simple as that. It's the right thing to do to not have this be passed. But I also have to trust that the voters will have their decision on this and hopefully they'll agree with the majority sentiment here about looking at it from a different perspective.
Thank you, Jose. Alex.
Yeah, I always try to think what is the right thing to do for everybody. And in my opinion, it is not the right thing to do to punish people who are living in the most dire straits they possibly can to hang on for the failure of decades of lost housing production, not just by Mountain View, but many cities around us. At the same time, Mountain View currently has the largest number of safe parking spots of any other city in Santa Clara County. And it is also not the right thing for our city to shoulder the load for everybody else. What I believe we need to do is make sure that we do provide a pipeline that is effective at transitioning people from RV living into permanent, stable, supportive housing. And that we can do that by identifying places in Mountain View that are not in residential streets where we can actually allow some form of RV parking and enable people to have the casework that they need to then be able to make that transition. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Alex. Lenny.
So I took a lot of heat and some negative campaigning because when I was on council, I refused to throw people out of town who had no place else to go. Pat and I proposed safe parking back, I think it was 2015. We finally have it, but not enough. Not enough services and too many restrictions like on music and electrical hookups and things like that. Nevertheless, the most important thing we can do as voters is one, defeat Measure C. It's an ordinance, we don't even know what streets are covered. No one's told us, no one's measured. And secondly, hold accountable those council members, the 4 council members who voted to put that on the ballot. Other things that I've worked on with the Community Foundation and other cities, we need reciprocity. A lot of Mountain View people are living in East Palo Alto and they're safe parking. The communities around here have to work together, not just on our own. People in Palo Alto are interested, but it's going to take a lot of effort to make this work, and we can't throw people out until there's someplace for them to go.
Thank you, Lenny. So that addresses that question. We have about 20 minutes left. Something that has been raised by numerous people is specifically about Measure D. So this was Allison's question. She typed it into the chat. And a number of people have sort of questioned, some of the candidates have supported Measure D. For those of you who don't know, just to briefly describe, Measure D made a number of changes to the CSFRA that potentially many people believed would have weakened rent control in Mountain View, and it would have explicitly excluded, instead of explicitly included, mobile homes under the CSFRA. So we're going to basically ask the candidates to address their positions on Measure D. If I can find the other question. This was from Christine Cray, who sort of wanted to ask about it. So she was a senior who was not covered under the CSFRA, and when the RHC voted to not allow mobile homes, her space rent has been going up during the pandemic. So she's sort of, again, wondering what your position was on Measure D. and why you supported it or did not support it. I think this will be pretty quick since we know what Measure D is. So this one would be 30 seconds. Answer topic on that. Lenny.
I oppose Measure D. When I was mayor, I talked to the city attorney about ways we could tweak Measure D to make it more effective, including adding rent control for mobile homes. But it would have created a loophole for raising rents so large you could drive an RV through it. So Measure D was a big mistake. The council could have done something that would have helped, could have cleaned up some of the administrative problems with the CSFRA. Instead, they chose to do something which would allow higher rents.
Thank you, Lenny. Paul.
I also opposed Measure D, and the community has spoken clearly twice now that this is the current regulatory regime that we want in this community. And so I think we need to have a few years where we see how it plays out. We need to see how the effects work in our community for a number of years. Certainly there'll be an opportunity to improve it in the future, but only after a period of community dialogue, a lot of data, and a lot of research on ways to make it even better. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Lisa.
Thank you. I did support Measure D. The two primary reasons were, one, I wanted to make sure it was very clear that the CSFRA did not cover mobile homes, so it was clear the city council could. When there was ambiguity, it puts us in a precarious position. So I wanted that clarified. And second is there are some programs that I think are important, such as seismic retrofits, that I struggle to make that mandatory when it's going to have a severe impact on small apartment complex owners. And I wanted to give them a vehicle to, over the lifetime of that asset, recoup their cost.
Thank you, Lisa. Alex.
Yep. So I, along with former Mayor Lenny Siegel, worked as co-lead for the No on Measure D campaign through the Mountain View Housing Justice Coalition, which was the lead organization against that campaign. And I also worked on helping secure critical endorsements as a campaign spokesperson from the Mountain View Voice, as well as the Santa Clara County Democratic Party. The reason why I oppose Measure D is because I think any renter with half a nose could definitely tell that the true intent of this measure was to increase rents and clear up ambiguity in favor of landlords. And all of us are struggling, and that's the last thing our community needs, and we won by 70%.
Thank you, Alex. Pat.
I oppose Measure D too. I wrote a op-ed about it that was published in The Voice, and I precinct walked opposing it. And basically because the CSFRA is helping a lot of people. And the Measure D was designed to weaken the CSFRA. So I was against it.
Thank you very much, Pat. John.
I was against Measure D. I campaigned against it. I helped organize the Silicon Valley DSA against it, and I was glad to see it was defeated. In addition to the other comments about why Measure D was bad, Measure D would have allowed the city council to appoint non-residents to the rental housing committee. I'm an activist, an organizer, and a fighter. That was galling to me. I do not want someone who's not in Mountain View telling me what my city's rents will be, and you shouldn't either. You should take Measure D as the insult it was.
Thank you, John. Jose.
Yes, I was supportive of campaign for Measure D, and it was a tough decision for me because I'm a renter. I live on Latham Street. It's no surprise. On the school board, I see a lot of my kids struggle. Their parents struggle to pay the rent. I looked at it more as a compromise and a test to see if both sides could come together to talk. Obviously, they can't. 3.5 would have been the maximum amount that's been raised so far. The state limits 4 to 5%. And I also wanted to see seismic retrofits be implemented in our soft developed apartment complexes because there's so many families there. Reduce the paperwork to get that done. Protect everyone. If you're concerned about them, you do it.
Okay, thank you, Jose. And Margaret.
Yes, I supported Measure D, and it was really an attempt for a compromise and to find middle ground, and also to really clean up some of the challenges we've experienced, like not being able to do a mandatory seismic retrofit program, clarifying in terms of mobile home park residents, and creating a real path to be able to do rent stabilization for them, or for you, some of you. So that's what it really was meant to be. It wasn't meant to be what others say. It was our attempt to find a middle ground, and it didn't pass because I actually heard from both sides that some that don't want rent control at all voted against it too. So.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. Sally.
I very strongly opposed Measure D, and I felt that the inclusion of the seismic issue in it was really sort of a fig leaf for a very self-dealing measure on the part of landlords. And I was really honored to be an official signer of the ballot arguments against Measure D.
I did that too, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Sally. Okay, there's a couple of other random topics that have been raised, but I think we have technically 13 minutes on the clock. If we had one more question with 90 seconds, that would take us a few minutes over, but then that could conclude the topic. And I think it's going to be a little bit more broad. Do we have, I'm trying to read the chat. Rezoning. I think candidates have addressed rezoning. I'm going to try to ask sort of more broadly, you know, as we sort of take stock of the impacts of COVID-19 and the pandemic on the community, and sort of what funding we have available. What do you think your priorities will be for allocating funds in the next City Council session? And for this one, you'll each get 90 seconds, and then this will conclude the candidate forum today.
Good. Okay.
Thanks, Alex.
So, are we good? Okay. So with regards to COVID-19 recovery, personally, I think that there is no amount of funding that can be used to prevent the eviction time bomb that is looming ahead of us once the eviction moratorium is canceled. And the emergency is over. I believe that we need to make sure that we remove eviction as a civil remedy for failure to pay rent by way of our small businesses and residents who have been severely impacted economically by COVID-19. I believe that we need to make sure that we do this because everyone is sacrificing. All businesses across the board have been sacrificed. Have sacrificed. And I believe that rental housing operation is no different a venture when you take on that business risk. I believe that by doing this and making sure that residents and landlords can find a way to provide some amount of non-burdening back rent back to landlord over time, that will enable us to actually look out for the smaller landlords, for the ones that aren't the Prometheuses and Todd Speakers of the world, who actually do need some funding to actually stay afloat and keep our residents housed. So I will make sure that we do that and fight for that, and make sure that our funding is also enabled for our public services, community outreach, and all of the other great programs that make Mountain View a great place to live for our youth and seniors especially.
Thank you very much, Alex. Sally.
There's no doubt that we're going to be facing difficult budget choices going forward. And I think what's very important to me out of that is that we cut those things that are the nice to haves sooner and really keep the stability and the security for essential services and for our families going forward. When I was on City Council previously, we put together the first reserve funds for Mountain View. I think that that has served us very, very well. And the fact is that housing is a public health measure. Right now, we need to do more to account for overcrowding in the housing that is. As I've said before, I think it's an awful time to destabilize the vehicle dwellers during a pandemic, when that can be a lifeline for people who fear eviction. We should all be having a full court press on the governor and the state legislature to take action on evictions, not push the Judicial Council to do what the legislature won't do, but really get active. And that to me implies a role that I would really like to see City Council do, is get into advocacy at the state level, advocating on behalf of our community on essential issues. And this is something that's just going to become more important in the next few years. And I think it's something that we've got to become trained to do.
Thank you, Sally. Margaret.
Thank you. Well, as mayor during this extraordinary time, I certainly understand the challenges, and I'm proud of our city. I think we've really risen to the occasion. We have the largest rent relief program in the county, $2.5 million we found of city funds to provide rental assistance for our tenants. And that was because we were hearing from them as soon as sheltering in place came about. And we talked with our city staff to implement this program. And it's something we've actually had for a long time. I'd been advocating for a long time to make it more robust, and this was the time to do it. We also had the Small Business Fund, and that was in partnership with a corporation, a major corporation in our city, and I thank them for stepping up. What we are dealing with is going to take everyone working together. I've been every Saturday morning, I am on a call with all the mayors in the city and the county, and we've talking about these issues. That's how we got COVID testing into Mountain View. And it's going to take us working in partnership with our regional leaders, the state. I have written letters of funding being taken away from the Bay Area, the ERAF funding, trying to preserve that here in Mountain View, and federally too. I think, hopefully there'll be a change there and we will see more assistance. So I've gone through it this year. I have the experience to continue that. And so I look forward to hopefully having that opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you, Margaret. Jose.
Boy, I tell you, my mouse is just a challenge. Okay, so I'm in favor of what's been said so far, but in terms of allocating funds, I want to make sure that whatever rental assistance we have right now increases in funding. If there hasn't been an outreach made to corporate donations or the tech giants around here, we need to push for that to happen as well. I know we do that often with Google and LinkedIn and other corporations through working with the school district. I think we should do that type of outreach too here now. And I'm not sure if this has been done or not, but I would like to see, especially for small businesses, waiving the fines, fees, interest, and penalties on sales tax payments. I'm not sure where we stand with that. If it has been done, great. If it hasn't, I think we should look into it, because we also have to look out for our small businesses and also find out from them what their situation is like. How long do they expect to be in business? How long do they think if this keeps going, they can stay here? And what is it that we can do that can get them the most help? If it's deferring rental payments or finding negotiations for figuring out what best to help them with so that they can keep their employees with living wages and benefits, let's do that to help them manage this, because yes, we all need to help one another in this situation. We've never seen something like this. So if we can't partner up now to figure this out, and if we can't dip into the reserves when need be to help our businesses and our communities out, I don't know when you would. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Jose. John.
Thank you for having me here today. I appreciate the opportunity to get my platform out there. I hope that I have earned your trust and your faith. I hope that I've proved that I'm a fighter for renters and workers in Mountain View. And I hope that my closing statement illustrates that as well. How will I allocate funds for our upcoming big budget crisis over the next 2 years? I believe that our community members and our small businesses have already made the sacrifice of shutting down access to the labor market or shutting down their storefronts. It's now time for us to turn to those companies who are still operating in Mountain View, the internet companies, Google, Microsoft, Intuit, LinkedIn, Pure Storage, Samsung, etc. These companies are still doing business and doing very well. It's time that we make our big corporate tenants sacrifice as well for our common good in our city. We can do that with increased corporate taxation, and I will fight for that. I am quoted in the Mountain View Voice with plans to close our budget gap over the next 2 years and make no cuts to our city services. I am not prepared to ask you or other citizens in Mountain View to make more sacrifices before we increase corporate taxation and make them finally live up to their responsibility in our city. I humbly ask for your vote and your endorsement. Thank you again.
Thank you, John. Lenny.
So I support a lot of the things that the city has been doing in response to the pandemic, but there's one major shortcoming, and that's the absence of data. We don't know how many people haven't been able to pay their rent. We don't know how many people have self-evicted, that has moved out because of the pandemic. We don't know how many small businesses are going out of business or unable to pay the rent. In order to figure out how to solve those problems, we need data. Secondly, in terms of cutting the budget, Mountain View's budget is going to be in a much better situation than a lot of other cities. If the Senate and presidency go Democratic, and I think most of us here agree on that, then we'll be better shape to address that. And if we can look forward to a better national situation, then our reserves will help us bridge the gap. I favor across-the-board budget cuts, not specialized budget cuts in one department or another. I did not answer the question earlier, didn't have the time on negative campaigning. I intend in this campaign to hold the incumbents accountable for what they've done. I don't intend to engage in personal attacks. I've been subject to those for the last few years in various languages, push polls, things I couldn't answer. But I intend in this campaign to make sure that people are accountable for their votes and their proposals. I expect the same will happen to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Lenny. Paul.
Thank you to everyone who put this together today, and thank you for everyone who's stuck with us in this very hot afternoon in Mountain View. When I think about our budget and budgetary priorities, I think about the recent failure of the city council to be flexible. When the budget came up for a vote recently, they said, hey, we can't change it. We can't respond to our community's priorities. We've been doing this for 7 months. The planning's been way out of the gate. We can't change anything now. If our community is going to thrive over the next few years, we're going to need a lot of flexibility. We're going to need to respond quickly to the needs in our community. And we're going to make our budget priorities follow as this unique period in our time continues to evolve. So first, we need to move faster. We need to be flexible. I think about things like the assistance we've given people with COVID, and I think about how we've spent even more money on other priorities. During this time, we authorized a $15 million pool. We're replacing a pool. We already have a good functioning pool. We could put that off and provide even more assistance to people that are struggling in our community. The city will often brag about spending $2 million while spending tens of millions on other priorities. So we can do more. We have a lot of resources in this community, and we need to use them to help our community through this incredibly unique period. And we need to make sure that spending is in line with the unique challenges we have today. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Lisa.
Thank you. So the city has been in a really good financial position for quite some time, but this is absolutely going to test us. I think it's really important that we watch out for our residents, whether they be renters or homeowners, and the small corporate landlords. A lot of those are small mom and pops that this was their business and this is their income in retirement. And I feel like we need to look at all of those. I agree we need more data. We have some, but absolutely we need more data. But it's really important to me to make sure we help residents and then our small businesses. And we've done quite a bit, but I think we're at the next phase here, and we need to figure out what help they need. We did have a group of city employees contact every single small business to talk to them about the resources that were available to them to understand their situation. I think it's time for a second round of that so that we have better information. I think we need to get the word out on some of the programs we have. I'm not sure that everyone has heard of them, even though I feel like we've done quite a bit. I'm hearing that some of the small landlords are teetering on the edge there. And the last thing we need is those units sold to a developer and those units torn down. We need to figure out what the smaller landlords need so that we can keep that housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Pat.
Well, when you come last in one of these discussions, a lot of really good ideas have already been put forward, and that's certainly the case today. I think the thing that we really need to concentrate on is staving off evictions and also small businesses going out of business. We don't want people who live in single family homes to be evicted. We don't want people who live in RVs to be evicted. We don't want people who live in apartments to be evicted. It's bad for our corporate public health, and it's a terrible tragedy for them personally. So we need to work to keep that from happening. One of the things that hasn't been mentioned by anybody is asking our local foundations. We have the Silicon Valley Community Foundation is one of the largest has one of the largest endowments in the world. We need to request their assistance and work harder to get it. Another thing I think is very important when times are tough is to make sure that our residents understand that good city services will be provided. People need their water, they need safety, they need their roads, they need parks, they need libraries. And I think we can make sure that everybody has that by putting off some capital improvements if we need to that are long-term, and concentrating on the programming that will improve people's day-to-day lives, particularly when times are tough. Then the other thing I'm really excited about is the prospect of rebuilding our economy to be much greener than it was before COVID-19 pandemic. I think that there's a lot of possibility for that, and I'm looking forward to working on it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Pat. And I think that is the field. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for attending. I'd especially like to thank Alex Brown for all of his work behind the scenes in getting this done. That was his candidate timer up there that he just threw together for fun. Thank you to all the candidates and the attendees for joining. I think we had over 100 live watching at one point. And thank you to everyone. You know, we don't always see eye to eye, but I thought this was a great opportunity for us to come together and have a respectful discussion about where we stand on the issues. The campaign season is just getting started. Other organizations will be holding other forums. We'll be sending out a follow-up email that will have links to recordings of this forum. And we can also provide contact info for the candidates, and we'll be in touch to make sure that all of this kind of goes smoothly. I thought, all things considered, it went pretty well. So yeah, just thanks everyone.
Take care. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, everyone else.
Thank you, Tim.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
And for those of you still online, I know we've already got, but if you want to send us feedback, you know, I tried my best. The first time to host anything, so it was an experience, but you know, it was good. It was good. So enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Try and stay cool.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thought it went great. You were awesome. I knew you would be. Both of you guys.
Well,